Welcome to the Other Side Pod. I'm Nadine. We're not experts. We're just humans having a human experience we think you can learn from, or relate to, or laugh at, or cry over. So hit download, dive in, and hear how folks found themselves on the other side. We're recording.
Perfect.
Before we jump into all things psychotherapy and therapy and mental health, wellness, and the holidays, we were just chatting about pre-gym food. And I think, okay, Tesia, what'd you have before you went to the gym this morning?
So I had a banana and I had just a little handful
Hmm,
of almonds.
love it. Alyssa, do you
Yeah.
do a pre-gym workout or
Yeah,
pre-whatever
I
food?
won't ever exercise without eating beforehand. I have to say I learned that the hard way because then I would do like spin
Same.
classes and I'd be like, why am I like gassed 20 minutes in and like dizzy? So you end up learning the hard way that like food is literally fuel. Yeah.
So what's your
It
go-to?
depends. Sometimes I'll do if I'm like in a rush, I'll do like a banana, eggs, protein bar. If I have time, I'll usually make like an omelet or I'll do like avocado toast with eggs or like an overnight oats kind of situation. Yeah, it just, I guess, depends on how short of time I have. But yeah, food is literally fuel, isn't it?
Yeah. I used to, well, it's true. Like I do feel sick if I eat a big meal or not a big meal, but I thought it was anything and then go work out. And then similarly, I was gassed. So I had this appointment at the gym and they were like checking in, how was I doing? I'm like, I'm like daily, I'm exhausted. Like I feel like not that I couldn't get up and go to my workout, but I definitely was like, something's amiss here. My body doesn't feel like it's getting stronger, even though it's saying it's getting stronger, it looks stronger, or whatever. I'm gaining muscle. And then the person was like, you should eat. And I was like, oh, I had to feel good. And she's like, just try it. Just like even a scoop of your protein powder in your coffee, which sounded awful because coffee is religious to me. I love my coffee. But I was like, let me just give it a whirl. It has been the biggest game changer this year. A full protein powder. I bought a
Nice.
frother, which David was like, you'll never use it. I
That's
use
Game
it every
changer.
day.
hilarious.
Game
Yeah.
changer. And then now I have this like delicious coffee protein scoop. And like I like my protein powder. It's like this delicious vanilla flavor. Anyway, game changer for anybody who thinks that food before the gym will make
Yeah,
them
I
sick.
can
It
Oh,
also,
you need
I can
to.
relate to
You
that.
need
I
it.
am not a
yeah.
morning food person. I don't typically eat breakfast. I end up feeling sick when I do eat. So learning to kind of like teach the body to eat just like a little something, right? That ends up being
Yeah.
tolerable, I think is so helpful. I love the little frother. I think that's so cool.
Listen, frother is a game changer. But what I love about what you just said, Alyssa, I feel like this is going to be this is going to be the whole
Whole
episode.
episode.
What I love
Here's
about
what
what
I
you
ate.
just said, yeah, it was like teach your body. Yeah, because you
Yeah.
can probably, I mean, maybe there was definitely experience where I ate something and went for a workout and was like, oh my God, I'm sick to my stomach. But I'm basing like my entire future on probably one episode or a
Right.
handful of episodes. And it's like, okay, wait, what could I tolerate before I go, whatever, lift weights, or if it's a spin class, or if it's a yoga, because depending on what you're going to do differs as well about what you want to eat and what your body can tolerate. So the idea of teaching your body, I really like that. That's beautiful. No wonder you're a therapist. Speaking of therapists, okay, can you both take a moment to introduce yourself? Alyssa, you go first.
All
Take the
right, I'll take
mic.
the mic. My name is Alyssa Malizia. I am a registered psychotherapist working in private practice in Ottawa. I've been a registered psychotherapist for about 6 years full time now. And I recently joined Shine Mental Health Collective in opening one of their wonderful clinics alongside Tesia, which has been a beautiful journey. So I now see clients full time in my own private practice at Shine while also running the practice alongside her. And I also really enjoy supervising as well. So that's a really big part of my practice now. And in my individual practice, I primarily see individuals ages 18 and up. Um, typically historically worked with clients who had borderline personality disorder, and I also work with couples. And yeah, that's just a little bit about me. In my spare time, I like to exercise, beg my husband for a dog. It's not yet happened, and eat at restaurants. So that's a little bit about me. Yeah.
Good. All right, Tasia, take the floor.
Oh my God, that was so funny. I was not expecting that at the end. That was
Because
great.
Tasha knows how long I'm begging for a dog, but I digress.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I do actually. And I'm really hoping that Christmas treats you well this year. We hope. We pray. Angelo, if you're listening, she deserves it. So, my name is Tasia. Thank you so much for having us on. I'm really excited to chat about all things therapy, all things mental health, especially as we approach the holiday season. And we're all Christmas matching right now. We have a cute little
Love
Christmas
that.
palette going on, which is
I love it.
adorable. I love Christmas. So as Alyssa mentioned, I co-direct the Shine Mental Health Collective with her. Also as she mentioned, it's been an absolute wonderful journey working with a partner. I am a registered psychotherapist, and I have been doing that for about, I think, like 8 years now, just over 8 years, and supervising for about 2 years. And I am loving the supervision portion of it. I, in a past life, did teachers college, so I was a teacher beforehand. And I think my passion for teaching, my passion for education is now like bleeding and intersecting into the world of psychotherapy, which is a lot of fun. So we have the privilege of working with two interns from the University of Ottawa this year. So they're sort of under our wing, and we're doing a lot of work alongside them, which includes lots of teaching, just, therapy 101, and all the skills, all the interventions, all the modalities and stuff like that. So that's been an absolute blast. And then I do work with clients as well. I work primarily with burnout, trauma, ADHD, and anxiety for adults.
Oh, you too. Thank you for doing what you do.
You're welcome.
For anybody listening who doesn't know the difference, what is psychotherapy?
So, psychotherapy is the treatment for mental health concerns. So, somebody can show up with or without a diagnosis, it doesn't matter, and experiencing some kind of distress, some kind of discomfort, or they can come to therapy just to explore and get to know a little bit about themselves. We like to kind of do like a little past, present, and future mapping of somebody's inner world and outer world, of course. So we might dig into childhood a little bit. We'll do some sort of present moment symptom awareness and figure out, what's going on, and what are some of the ways in which they may be experiencing, again, distress, discomfort, or just wanting to learn a little bit more. And then, align all of those things with some future goals. So it's, yeah.
So psychotherapy, psychology, psychiatrists, like what's the differentiating
Yeah.
factor?
The difference is, well, there's a few. One of the main differences is education and what that education allows and affords as an option to the practicing therapist. So, at an overarching level, psychiatrists, psychologists, and psychotherapists can all practice the act of psychotherapy, assuming they are part of a regulatory body that allows for that. So, that's an overarching level. A psychiatrist has the education to be able to also prescribe medication as well as diagnose. A psychologist can diagnose, though they cannot prescribe, though I think that could change in the near future. So I've been hearing some talk, some chatter in the woodworks. And psychotherapy can, again, practice and see clients and have clients, though they cannot diagnose or prescribe medication. So there are, rules and regulations associated with the, I suppose, ceiling to what each regulated title can provide, depending on education as well as depending on licensing and which regulatory body you are a part of.
Okay. And how would someone access the two of you or a psychotherapist in general? Well, okay, wait. Tasia and Alyssa are co-directors of Shine Mental Health Collective, which I will put the website in the notes of the show. So go on there and find these two lovely women. But yeah, how would someone who's listening who's like, you know what, I could use some help or I could talk to somebody, especially around the holidays, because this is going to be released in December, how would they access help? A psychotherapist.
So the beautiful thing about psychotherapy is that you don't need a referral. And for clinics like ours, we have a really awesome team of therapists who are pretty actively taking on new clients. So we don't really have a wait list for a lot of services right now, which is fantastic. So anybody who, really is looking for some kind of support specific to the realm of mental health, whether it's individuals, couples, we even have a therapist who treats children and teenagers as well. So, we do have those services available. So folks can self-refer. They can as easily just go to our website, have a look at all the profiles. And we do also have 3 locations throughout Ottawa, 2 downtown and 1 in the Nepean area. So serving sort of Ottawa West. So it's pretty accessible in that way. And all of our therapists also see folks virtually as well. So
Oh,
no referrals needed.
that's great. And is it covered by insurance? I know each insurance is different, but in general, on average, do insurance cover psychotherapy?
Yeah. For the
Awesome.
most part, yes. Yeah,
Okay,
yeah, yeah.
great.
You just have to make sure that your insurance package through work specifies psychotherapist or
Yeah,
psychotherapy
I
treatment.
think we can say with, well, at least for my private practice, I'd say like 98% of my clients who have insurance coverage have coverage to some degree, right? I think that's something that has shifted widely since the onset of COVID, which, we saw a huge, huge change in terms of, which I think is great, having insurance companies not only allow psychotherapists to be covered under, their insurance plan, but also we've seen an increase in terms of coverage, right? Like coverage amounts annually. So I think that's really great. But to kind of circle back to your question, a lot of people I think will either find or try to access psychotherapy through Google searches, social media. We do have a social media presence. Sometimes family doctors' offices will refer them. They hear from friends and family. Like I think because therapy has become a little bit less stigmatized and people are talking about it, I think word of mouth is also a pretty big thing for people, right? They're starting to talk to each other. They're starting to, be a bit more vulnerable about their mental health and maybe the avenues they're choosing to take to seek additional forms of support. And so I think there's a wide variety of ways in which people can find and access therapy today that I think didn't really even readily exist even like 5 or 10 years ago. So I think that's really fantastic.
Yeah, I do think it's way more talked about. When I first went to therapy, it would be probably 15 years ago. I had gotten married and like a year in was like, I think I married the wrong person and had a major, like, yeah, hard time, major hard time.
So
For the
real.
first, yeah, and I wasn't really great at talking about what I was going through with anybody, even my my like best friends. I don't even think I'd mentioned anything to them, just like suffered in silence. And one day I remember I'm like, I felt so awful that I Googled, I don't know what I would have put in, therapist for divorce or whatever. And this man's profile, I can't remember his name and I wish I could because I'd love to give him a shout out. He was incredible. Anyway, something about how he wrote his bio really like it got me right in the heart. I'm like, oh my gosh, I think this guy's gonna understand me, or I think I'm gonna relate to this person. And I remember I ended up on his wait, this is like I couldn't write this better. I end up in his office on Valentine's Day. I was like crying, like, why do I want to leave a really good person? Because my ex-husband's a really nice man. And I'm like, why do I want to leave this person? And it was a saving grace, and I don't know why I thought to do it because no one in my life had gone to therapy. And I remember when I started to talk about it, no one made me feel bad about it. No one questioned me, but it almost opened the door to have the conversation because it was 15 years ago. And it isn't like today where I mean, I often share about therapy and coaching. And I mean, I do coaching now. So it is more common, more acceptable. I don't even know the right word. I just think we're talking about the fact that it's nice to have help getting through life because life is really difficult. And it doesn't mean like I couldn't handle myself or you can't handle yourself.
Absolutely.
It's like, why not, why not seek out help to help you through something? It is so nice. It's like, anyway, so yes, to your point, it is more talked about, which is also why I wanted to have you both on the podcast because isn't it nice to, well, I want to hear about what it's like to be a therapist because God's work, you too. And I want to hear how you take care of yourselves and your mental and physical health and how it feels to sit in your chair. But yeah, I also want to make it more accessible, more talked about, even more talked about. And I will put a link to your Instagram as well because I love your Instagram. It is so bright, and you talk about making psychotherapy accessible, even if you don't have therapy. I know you do, I think, I don't know if you do a sliding scale, but I know you do
Mhm.
something to help make it. Yeah. Tell me a
We
little bit
do.
more about that.
Yeah, so we do have a sliding scale program that runs from September till April. And then after between April and September, we do have a number of other therapists who accept clients on a sliding scale option as well. So between September to April, we have two wonderful interns from the University of Ottawa. So they're qualifying, they're in their master's degree right now. And they are, I mean, the two will shut them out. They're incredible, incredible, incredibly talented, super gifted. I don't know what we did in a past life to deserve the two of them, but they're offering sliding scale psychotherapy, so $20 to $50 per session, which again just makes it just so much more accessible to those who may not have
Yeah.
access to benefits. Or we've all been in that transitional period between being a student under mom and dad's insurance to you don't have your job yet, or anybody who's experiencing financial barriers, which is so real in today's economy. So we do have accessible options, which is, I mean, we're just so grateful to be able to have the opportunity to offer that. And of course, in making therapy a bit more accessible, we just really do our best as therapists to be as human as possible. We don't want to show up pathologizing people. We don't want to show up shaming anybody or judging them for whatever they're experiencing in their life. So it's a community and a collaborative effort, and also something that we embody in the ways in which we treat our clients.
Lisa, what in the world made you get into psychotherapy?
Good question. I think this was a layered um, process for me. I think my love or curiosity about therapy actually began with my parents, which is a really maybe interesting thing to say. And maybe not for the reasons that people would expect. I think a lot of people say, well, my journey began with therapy because of X, maybe struggle that I had. But my curiosity about therapy began with my parents because of the ways in which they raved how couples therapy helped them in their relationships throughout the years in their marriage. And
Shout out to your mom and
shout out to my
dad.
mom and dad,
Oh,
their gentle vulnerability that was age appropriate as well really had me curious. And it sort of got the wheels turning, right? Here's a couple that shared that they navigated many difficulties, who have built such a beautiful relationship that I can see and that I get to be a part of and witness right in front of me. So that's where that began for me. And then, as most people do when they graduate high school, they throw themselves into whatever they think they could be interested in, especially if they're uncertain. And so I threw myself into an undergraduate degree in psychology, and just it kind of confirmed my path. So it was actually a very linear path for me. And the more that I learned about psychotherapy, the more that I started seeing a therapist as well over the years. It really just further, enhanced my appreciation for the world and field of psychotherapy. And I was very lucky in I think my search for a career, because the more that I delved into this, the more I loved it and the more certain I became about it. So I understand as a path that not everybody does take, but it all started with my parents. Yeah, it all started with my parents.
that's
So sweet.
amazing. Yeah. Tasia, what about you?
I have a little bit of a unique path, I would say, to psychotherapy. So my undergrad, and I think my first love is in literature. So I have an honors degree in a major in French literature with a minor in English literature. And I think I've always just been very naturally curious about humans and people and the human condition and philosophy and all of the above. And I love to write, I love to read. So I did this degree, had everybody in my life telling me, "Oh, you should be a teacher. You have the personality to teach." I'm very bubbly and animated, and I just like get very excited about everything super easily. And so yeah, did my undergrad in literature, went to teachers college at the ripe age of like 21, I think. So I was a baby, 21 or 22, and I was doing my placements in teachers college, and I was like, I am going to burn out in this career. I am going to burn out. I think one of my placements, you have two placements, one of which was in a school that a lot of the teachers, and mind you, this was also in like May of the school year. So like a lot of them were just really running on fumes. And like, I came in all energized and excited, and I'm like doing my little teachers college placement, and a lot of the teachers that I was around were, really, and rightfully so, feeling quite burnt out in a lot of ways. And so I think I recognized that pretty quickly and kind of thought, okay, what can I do with this? I have this teaching degree. I don't know if I really want to teach. And therapy has always kind of been something that I've always wanted to dabble in, but never really thought I could in a lot of ways. Like I had been to therapy myself in a past life. And, I've always been very curious, again, as I said, about people and about helping people and supporting people. And I found when I was in my placements for Teachers College, I was way more concerned with why my students were so anxious and depressed and stressed out and all of the above. And so a lot of them would kind of come to me on lunch to just chat about things, about life, and about the different struggles that they're having. So, yeah, I think that's what led me to apply to the master's at the University of Ottawa. It's a master's of education in counseling psychology. So I was able to do a couple of catch up credits in psych and then got in. The rest is history. Here we are.
So
And I'm
is it
so
what you,
glad. I love this career.
yeah, like, is it what you expected it to be? Or yeah, but is it what you expected it to be?
Like the career.
Yeah, like the day to
Yeah.
day practicing.
You know what? I think it's more than what I expected it to be, if that makes sense. I don't think I realized the ways in which it could actually be so meaningful and rewarding, right? No, obviously it's difficult, it's heavy, and I think I expected that piece to be very true, but I don't think I realized what little gifts you can pick up along the way from your clients and how much you would learn and how much you would grow as a human and as a person. So I really do think that there's a lot adjacent to the career of psychotherapy that really surprised me.
Alyssa, is it more or less energy requirement from you than you thought?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think because of where I started in my viewpoint of what psychotherapy and the benefits of psychotherapy could look like, I actually had the opposite experience of Tasia. I knew all the great things that could come of it, but I also had not really considered the very, very difficult parts of it, understandably difficult parts of it, in being a psychotherapist, especially, part of my work being in couples therapy, right? Part of your work as a couples therapist is to sometimes also help people realize that they're better off separated, right? So it's sometimes, very difficult work, of course, very rewarding work, like majorly extremely rewarding. And depending on how you look at the goal of, some of the work that you do with clients, it can all be very rewarding, even the difficult stuff, right? So I would say that I had expected it to be a little different than it had, than it had shaped up to be, because I was only exposed to all the positive, great parts of it, if that makes sense. And so I had to learn really early on to, safeguard my capacity. I had to learn what my capacity was. That took years. I think it took me like 2 or 3 years to, as a psychotherapist, to really understand what my capacity was as a therapist and what that even meant, and how to gauge energy and, learn and look for signals when I was starting to feel maybe mentally or emotionally drained, and then learn ways to, replenish, right? So I think that was a really big learning curve and learning process for me, and it did take me a couple years to kind of sort that out. I don't know. I feel like our capacities are always evolving too. So I don't know if that's like an answer that I'm just going to have, perfect certainty on. I feel like this might be a lifelong thing,
Yeah,
but
fair.
yeah, to answer your question, I think took me a couple of years to really gauge, what my capacity was, how to replenish energy, how to safeguard energy, how to compartmentalize when appropriate, and things like that. So
So, do you two have a supervisor or like a group of therapists that you sit with to talk about these things, to say, hey, I'm feeling a pushback from my capacity level, or like to figure these out for yourself, but to have help from fellow therapists, psychotherapists to brainstorm these things together?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of why, well, not why, there's a couple reasons behind why, but a big reason as to why we call ourselves the Shine Mental Health Collective instead of clinic. And I think the big reason is that we really wanted to focus on creating a community, right? Healing doesn't just happen at the individual level, but true healing happens at the community level, in the community space. And I find as psychotherapists, sometimes this job can get quite isolating in private practice, right? We kind of have our office, we have our book of clients, we kind of do the we do the thing over and over and over again. So in creating Shine, one of our big intentions was to create this sense of collective, this collective sense of community, I should say. And so in doing so, we do monthly peer consultations where we all get together as a team and chit chat about everything and anything. It's not always case related or client related, but sometimes it's just about like therapeutic presence, therapist self-care, the ways in which we can show up for ourselves, right? And we do try to have like an open door policy. So if you have a really big session, you just go to your friend's office and sit on their couch and just be like, oh my God, what did I just hear? Obviously, we can't share the details of anything. That's
Yeah.
all strictly confidential. We're all good about respecting that. But the gist of it is like, even if we have a big story or a big emotion or something that was felt in sessions, and it's so valuable to have access to people around you, therapists who can truly understand it,
Oh, that
right?
is
And
so lovely. Like, how many people are at Shine Collective?
so we
How
have
many
about
therapists?
30 some
30.
total.
And
Yeah.
you, 30 of you, if everyone can make it, the goal is 30 of you meet once a month together for how
Mhm.
long?
We do about an hour, and then all of the therapists have supervisors. So that's a big important part of a psychotherapist, specifically when you're in your first few years, is to have a supervisor. It is a requirement up until a certain amount of supervision hours, and then once you get into the independent side of practice, it's more like it's not obligatory anymore, but I think everybody still does engage in
Yeah.
supervision. We very much recommend it. Yeah,
So
100%.
what does it mean to be a supervisor? Because you both supervise now, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So we do both supervise. I think, you know, part of being a supervisor means understanding what your supervisory role and approach would look like. That can be very different from supervisor to supervisor. I would like to think that I take on more of an education focused role as a supervisor, though I aim to be as flexible as possible with my supervisees. But the reality is, you could be supervising therapists that are at very different stages in their career, very different levels of expertise, different theoretical orientations, you name it, right? There can be so much variety. And so I think one thing that I try to adopt is a lot of flexibility to try to tailor my approaches or to tailor my support to what my supervisees need. And I enjoy taking on more of a teaching role, which means exposing my supervisees to skills, to theoretical frameworks, of course, that they want to learn and that they're curious about, but to help them develop skills and feel more confidently about the work that they're doing. So I think that's also part of the supervisor role is, who do you want to be, not just as a supervisor, but as a human to the people around you. So
Okay, so this is what I have in my head. I don't think it goes like this. I'm in Tasia's office and we're having a session and Alyssa's sitting behind Tasia supervising. Like that's not how this
no,
works, right?
No,
no.
no.
Okay. So you imagine. So I'm sitting with Tasia. We're having our hour session. I'm guessing, I guess I shouldn't guess, but do you make notes, Tasia, while you're chatting with somebody?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I do. I have like paper pen, but I use an iPad and then just like
Okay.
type up the notes on our secure platform after that.
So if our session ends, is this how a supervisee like is it a set appointment with someone to check in or is it like, oh, I've had a
Yep.
difficult session, I'm going to reach out, or is it either or?
Either or. So we do have like a pre-established frequency that we'll do with our supervisees. With our interns, it's weekly. So they have like very
Ah,
frequent supervision, which is very important when you're first starting out. With our qualifying psychotherapists, so those who've graduated from their master's program and now they're practicing, it's like usually once a month or once every 2 weeks, give or take, depending on again what they need. And then those who are in independent practice who are seeking external supervision or some more mentorship, guidance, things like that. It might be like once a month or once every 6 weeks, maybe once every 2 months, give or take. So Nadine, if you were my client and you came to me, you laid on my couch, you cried, you gave me all of spilled your beans, and let's say it was a really difficult session and
mhm.
Alyssa was my supervisor, then I could, call or text her and say like, hey, do you have 5 minutes just to debrief? But if you and I had a session and let's say it went really well and you're thriving, you love your life, everything's good, then I wouldn't feel the need, I should say, to necessarily report anything. I would just wait until me and Alyssa's supervision session in a week or so.
I get it. Okay. Um, okay, wait. You don't have to answer this, but I I'm dying to know. Alyssa, I think this is
Okay.
more for you if you see couples. Is
I'm
it?
like, okay.
Yeah, you're sitting there. I'm like, you have a couple and you strongly, strongly relate to one over the other. Does that happen? How difficult is it when that happens? And have you ever had the situation where you actually really strongly dislike one of them and you're like, it's going to be really hard to help this couple because, yeah, one of them I can relate to, one of them there's like this strong dislike. I ask because, do you ever watch that? What's that therapy show? She's in New York,
Yes,
Morna, or
I have
what's her
seen
name?
her TV series.
What's the
Gosh,
name
I'm
of it?
forgetting her name.
Is it
Yeah,
couples
it's
counseling?
very
Is
well
that what it's
known.
Couples
called?
therapy, I
Yeah,
Yeah,
think.
couples therapy.
it's
It's
very
so
good.
good. And David and I
Yeah.
love watching it. And we're like, sometimes, I mean, you can see faults in both people and you can see beautiful things in both people. Like no one's perfect, right? We're messy little humans and that's okay. But sometimes a couple walks in and I'm like, this half of this couple is despicable. I don't know how. Is it Lorna? It's something like that. Anyway, I'm like, I don't know how she's sitting there and taking in this person's energy. I loathe them. Alyssa, does that happen?
So no, and I'll explain why from a therapist perspective that does not happen for a multitude of different reasons. So the first thing is being a therapist, of course, means that you're human. So you will experience feelings about something. It could be something that's said, maybe particular, aspects of a human being that's sitting right in front of you. But your role as at least an effective therapist is to constantly self-reflect and be curious about and look for any, transference or counter-transference that could be happening in a therapy session, and that includes couples therapy. Okay. So, that means if a particular client in individual therapy or in couples therapy is evoking an emotion in you, it is your responsibility to be curious about and reflective. And, if you need to, maybe seek consultation or supervision to help determine why we're having that reaction. So that's the first part of it. So A, yes, we're human. B, yes, it can happen. C, do we want to kind of allow that to be a part of a healthy practice, especially with couples? Technically, no. Your role as a couples therapist is to be, as unbiased and hold the weight of both partners as much as you can. It does happen where there is one partner who either is in individual therapy and it's growing and has all of these skills, another partner who maybe for whatever reason isn't in therapy at that time or doesn't have those same skills or experiences some struggles that maybe the other person is not. And so you can be reflective and reflect what you're observing, right, clinically. But your role as a couples therapist is to try to hold that balance. Now, that doesn't mean not calling people out in couples therapy at times, which is also part of the role. There's a way that you can be clinical about that in a way that is adaptive and respectful and constructive, because that is your job as a couples therapist. But yes, the answer in short is, do we have emotion? Sometimes, yes. Is that normal? Yes. Do we want to do something about it so we're as effective as possible for ourselves, but also for the couple in front of us? Also, yes.
Picture it like you are sitting there, whether it's a couple or not, as you're talking. I'm picturing someone sitting across from either of you or a couple sitting across from either of you and you're listening, you're taking everything in, but you're almost trying to create, like you're feeling it, so you're allowing it in to say like, okay, I'm human, I'm gonna have a reaction, maybe I'm gonna have a feeling about this, but then you're trying to almost hold that outside of your body because you're like, this isn't mine actually, right? Like I don't have
Mhm.
to learn to live with this person, or I don't have to take on what this person's sharing with me, because that's actually not helpful, because then I'm not sure the word you use, but it's like transference or something, or maybe then you almost want to become like a fixer, which is not helpful and actually can be quite toxic, I'm sure, in that relationship. So, right, you're sitting there actively listening, but constantly checking in with
Yes, that's
yourself.
exactly it.
Yeah,
That's exactly it. I should say the process of couple therapy is very different from individual therapy. How you will structure, your process in couples therapy is a lot more direct than you would in individual therapy. In individual therapy, you're really just walking alongside the client, helping them come to their own conclusions, maybe offering reframes. And that's not to say that you can't do all of those same things in couples therapy, but sometimes you do have to be a little bit more direct and you do have to check yourself a lot more, right, to be an effective couples therapist because you're holding a dynamic that you're witnessing in front of you, right?
Yeah.
Um,
And two humans having probably big emotions, or one of them not even able to have emotions, and the other one like, help me get something
right,
out of this
right.
person. Yeah, right. Okay, I got a great story.
Let's hear
David and
it.
I,
Bring it on.
bless my husband. I was like, I want to go to couples therapy. And he's like, oh gosh. I just thought it was important to have someone that could get to know us when there wasn't crisis. And not crisis necessarily even Nadine and David crisis, but like afterwards my dad died. Like stuff's gonna happen
Absolutely.
in life that's gonna be harder on both people because they're trying to show up for each other, you know? Anyway, so we start seeing this lovely woman. And one day, I'm like, we actually paid someone to listen to us argue about the patriarchy because this is what happened. I was sitting in a chair across from David, and there was a little coffee table between us, like a tiny one. And our lovely therapist, Suzanne, was sitting to the left of us. And we were in her office. And I don't know how the argument started, but I got fiery about the patriarchy, and David was fiery about whatever. And I looked at Suzanne because she was a woman, and I was like, I cannot believe, on behalf of all women, you don't want to pick up that coffee table and throw it across the room. And she held her ground. She was so calm. And then, I wasn't like that. Yeah, I guess I was enraged, but like also that was kind of funny. And so, anyway, David and I walk out. We'd leave therapy. We'd go get like dinner. It was like sweet 'cause it wasn't an argument that we carried with us. It was just we could easily just get it out and like move on. Anyway, we're not going to solve the patriarchy in one session. And so the next time we go back to Suzanne, we sit in her office and she was so gentle. She was like, now, before we begin, Nadine, I just need to let you know that, like, as your therapist, I'm never going to want to pick up the coffee table and throw it across the room because I agree with you more than David. I'm like, yeah, but as a woman, don't you just wanna? And she was like, I'm not gonna do that. But anyway, therapy with David, Nadine, we could have been a
I
TV
love
show.
that. I
We
love
could have,
That would
that.
have been fun to watch. I would have
right?
paid
That would
for
have
that
been a great
subscription.
episode. Yeah. So, given yeah, it's a lot of work what you do. How do you take care of you? Besides, as a collective, you're there for each other and you go check in. But I'm talking about you go home, your laptop's closed. How do you re-energize after a heavy client day?
Yeah. So therapist self-care is something that I feel truly passionate about. And it's something that I really emphasize a lot in supervision. And I think it's just because I got to a point where my body was like, nope, pay attention to me. This is important right now. And, really had to hone in on my own self-care skills. So the way I see self-care is less about like the action and like what you're doing, but more about like why you're doing it. And that why needs to be aligned with what you need and or what you value. Right. So it is a really subtle sort of attunement to listening to what your body may need, listening to what your mind may need, and really responding accordingly to that. So self-care isn't always like sitting in a bubble bath and drinking a glass of wine or whatever, even though all of those things might feel really good. It's, is that really what you need in that moment? So as a therapist, oftentimes, we may have a really big heavy session and we will feel that inevitably in our body. That energy will almost sit here, right? And sometimes it shows up in like a real active jitteriness, and sometimes it shows up in a really thick heaviness that we almost carry with us. So it is important to be extremely mindful of the ways in which we individually pick up on emotions, which looks very differently person to person. And sometimes it's about like between sessions, like shaking it out, calling a friend, laying on the floor, giving yourself the time to cry, like having a snack, making sure you're going to the washroom, drinking water, those kinds of things, right? And those actions may vary day to day, just as long as you're attuned to what you need, why you may need that. And, if certain actions then aren't having, a really positive or happy outcome for you, then it's important to look at those actions and pivot accordingly. Right. I do like to always emphasize like working with the brain and the body that you have, not the brain and the body that you wish you had. Right. And so what that means is, adjusting your schedule accordingly to your energy levels, let's say, if possible, or, being mindful of like when you're doing your admin, when you're doing your session notes, do you need to maybe weave in more people into your space? And what I mean by that is like relying on a couple more people to be able to help you process some things, right? Do you need maybe a little bit more supervision and so on and so forth? So everybody is very different, and that process of self-care will vary person to person, but it is crucial to being a therapist. You have to practice what you preach. And it can become pretty apparent when your therapist isn't practicing what they preach.
Right, right. And
Yeah.
you also see a therapist, right?
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Outside of
Yeah.
supervision, like you have your own
Mhm.
person for your own personal. Yeah.
Oh yeah. I got a crew. I got a pit crew ready to go.
I love
Like
it.
kill me,
I
take
know we're like
me.
those cars on the racetrack, like the pit
Yeah,
crew. We like
literally.
pull in fast. We're like, everyone take care of me.
Hmm. Oh
Alyssa,
yeah. Yeah.
does it
Yeah.
Oh,
look
like
different
it
for
really
you?
takes a village. It really does.
Yeah.
And yeah, to Tasha's point, self-care looks very different. Will look and feel very different from person to person. Just as I say to my clients, you need to build a coping toolbox by trying different things out and rating them and seeing how they work or don't work for you. The same is said for, us as individuals, as therapists. And like Tasha said, you take care of yourself or your work's going to take care of you. And that's a really ugly thing, especially in the line of work that we have. I actually just said this to some of our interns last week. Whatever they thought self care was and whatever forms of self care they engaged in before becoming a therapist, we need to double it now, right? Whatever those efforts end up looking
Ah,
like, because we are
Yeah.
carrying so much. And again, carrying that and coping with it and compartmentalizing and having skills for that is important. But also at the end of the day, that is the nature of the work that we're engaging in. And so sometimes we have to up that self-care as well, depending on how rigorous or how demanding, mentally, emotionally, physically your career is, or even things outside of your career, right? So I like to look at self-care as being fluid and along a spectrum. There could be some weeks where maybe you're, high functioning, feeling good, there's low stress, life is relatively neutral, right? And maybe we don't perceive that we need to check in with ourselves as much. I think self-care should always be a practice, right? But maybe we don't have to up the ante on it that week. And then, maybe other weeks we're like, oh, I got to double down in, my self-love towards myself and my replenishment and really rebuild or safeguard capacity as best as possible. So I think it's also very fluid, and can be buildable depending on what you're going through and what you're experiencing.
it's
Yeah.
like trusting that it ebbs and flows
Yeah.
also. I
Yeah.
once read this beautiful article, which if I can find, I will also put in the notes because it was so lovely. It was after my dad died, and I was Googling for writing about death and cancer, and it just was helping me in feel my feelings or even notice my feelings. And I read this beautiful article by this man who was diagnosed with cancer, and I believe he's an actor in India. And anyway, he wrote this beautiful thing. And in it, he said, it's like I'm a cork in the ocean. So I cannot fight the current. You just have to allow yourself to be that floating cork, and it will take you where it's going to take you. But like what actually causes so much strife and stress and anxiety and chaos in your life is when you fight those currents.
Yeah.
So if you can tune into how it feels to be a cork in the ocean and you can just allow yourself to be that cork, and not that life's going to be easier. Gosh, life can
Yeah.
be very difficult at times,
Yeah.
but you fight it a little less, perhaps. Of knowing when it gets a little more intense. It's the holiday season. And so, why? And I didn't even start hearing this. I'm probably, I don't know, maybe in the last 5 years, maybe in the last 10 years. I can't really remember. But now I definitely am more in tune or tuned into the fact that the holidays can be really hard on people for
Yeah.
their mental health. And I mean, I think I know why, but I'm going to ask anyway. Why do you think
Yeah.
that is?
I think there's so many reasons as to why the holidays can be so difficult. First and foremost, expectations, right? Like I think a lot of folks put a ton of pressure on themselves around the holidays to like make it so perfect, make it so happy, make it so magical. And that can pose significant financial barriers or even raise like financial concerns for folks who may not be able to afford all of the materialistic Christmas luxuries, we'll call them. And so that's a big one. Family's a big one. So there's, you gotta go home and see the family. And that isn't always a super pleasant experience for everyone who may feel outed by their family or ousted in some way, shape, or form, or even if there might be some unconscious tension bubbling up, right? And so expectations, family, and again, it's marketed as this cheerful, happy-go-lucky time. It's also rooted in the middle of freaking winter, so it's not always like the time where you're going to feel super magical and really excited about everything. You know what I mean? There's a lot of layers as to why the holidays are challenging for a lot of folks, and it's our busy time as therapists for sure.
Yeah.
I think
Okay.
Alyssa
So
can
it
attest to this
is
too.
in the year. What is the busiest month or two?
Yeah. Yeah.
December,
It
January,
January
ebbs
too.
and
Okay.
yeah,
flows.
and
It
September, but
really it ebbs and flows.
yeah.
Like there have been some years like where I've been able to confidently say like summertime has been less busy and winter has been busier, though this past summer that was not the case for me. Right. So I think it definitely
Right.
I don't know if it has a rhyme or rhythm to it in terms of client need, at least for my personal practice. However, to Tasha's point, we tend to see an uptick in the increase of therapy or increased demand as soon as like October rolls around. So as soon as people set
Yeah.
into like
Right.
that September busyness, we're away from vacation, we're back to work, projects are picking up, kids are back in school, obligations have increased, demands have increased. We tend to see an uptick in demand for therapy. That does
Yeah.
double as we get closer into the winter months. I do have to say, probably an additional factor as to why it probably gets busy before the holidays is a lot of people are trying to use up their coverage if it exists before it resets in the new year. It's a
Right.
pretty common thing for people to come
Yeah.
in and say, well, I have this much coverage left. Let's see if we could use it all before, January. And then you're sitting there like, I'm fully booked. I don't know how to squeeze you in. But it's, but so that can also be a thing, right? There can be the increased demand due to stressors and due to life happening again post summer that can be very difficult for people to shift into, right? People kind of want to use up their coverage as well, right? So for lesser reasons. But
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. The other
yeah.
thing about the holidays, I would think, and maybe I'm wrong, is everything around it is it's magical, it's beautiful. Look at these beautiful lights. And then all those movies. And I think maybe I don't know, maybe you've lost somebody for like
Yeah.
maybe it's a breakup, maybe there's a death, maybe there's a shift in
Yep.
friendship, and those Hallmark movies can make someone feel pretty lonely or isolated from their connections. So yeah, I just
Anytime life or society or our culture has like a specific set of expectations that are so misaligned with our inner world, that can be
yeah,
painful.
yeah,
That can be really
right,
painful, right? Like you yourself have experienced loss or you've experienced hardship in the family system, or maybe you just lost your job, or something's going
right.
up that is so incongruent with the reality of what's in front of you. It's a 0 out of 10 experience for a human being. It's a lot to process, right? Because all of a sudden you feel almost ashamed of this experience, or you might feel maybe very isolated in that too. And so that's one thing that we do notice around the holidays specifically, but it's also true for some things like summertime, right? Some people who, don't have a network or a community or, a lot of friends, let's say, in their social system. Then summer rolls around and it's, typically one where you're out at the cottage every weekend and you're at barbecues, and there's weddings and there's celebrations and whatnot. And so that can also raise a lot of feelings for a lot of folks who may not necessarily have that community or have those connections with people, right? Back to school, Valentine's Day, you name it, right? Anytime
Right.
there's something majorly expected of us in the outside world that is totally incongruent or does not reflect what's going on in our inside world, that's hell on earth.
It almost highlights what you feel like is
Exactly.
missing for yourself, right?
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
How this just popped into my head. So I'm curious to hear your answer. What do you think about people using AI for
Yeah,
therapy?
this has been a hot topic. We've been talking about this in our supervisions with our own supervisors, our consultation groups with colleagues. It has been a hot topic and one that I believe is very complex and I'll sort of explain why. At least from my personal perspective, I don't believe AI to be extremely harmful or damaging so long as the reasons we're using it is not harmful. And I'll kind of explain why. What we understand about AI at present is that typically when we are consulting with it, it will mold itself to what it is that it knows you're looking for or what it knows that you're wanting to hear. It will side with you like an unbiased friend unless you specifically ask it not to, right? And a lot of people don't know that. So I do believe AI can be beneficial in some ways. For example, if I assign somebody, homework to consider core values, to then, rebuild a part of their identity, and they're like, oh my God, like scratch my head. What are examples of core values, right? If we're just plugging that into an AI system saying, can you give me a list of core values that I can look over? Well, that's neutral in nature, right? That's not harmful. That's helpful, right? You got
Like
it. We
using
can
Google.
cultivate, our
Yeah.
own opinion based on the information we're being provided, right? So that can be, not harmful in nature. But when people start to use AI to talk about interpersonal relationships, struggles, that can start to become biased. I also recently heard that AI is considering not offering like medical advice anymore and like things that are a little bit more nuanced that touch into like legalities or ethics,
Mhm.
right? So I think we're seeing some real barriers and boundaries that need to be put in place specific to the use of AI because it
Yeah.
can become very harmful depending on how it is being used. In short, is my
Yeah.
personal take on it. I'm sure, maybe other people might have different
Yeah.
opinions. Tasha, you might have a different opinion. That this is at least at present my opinion about it. Yeah.
No, I fully agree with what Alyssa's saying from all perspectives. Like it's you can consider it a very neutral tool, and when you start to engage with it, if you don't have those parameters in play, if you don't have that coding or those boundaries that say, you know, don't speak to me like an enabling best friend, which it will default to, then it can be quite harmful, right? It's all about the ways in which we use it, the ways in which we engage with it. And so having a lot of education, like I've used ChatGPT in my sessions before with some clients if we're brainstorming something or, a little information and whatnot. More recently, I was exploring with a female client of mine about the ways in which her hormones would affect, her mental health and what are some of the foods that she could eat to support that and some of the things that she could do. So that was really helpful. It was very informative. We kind of just went through a whole bunch of things together. I learned a lot about, our menstrual cycle and our hormonal cycle, which is fantastic. And so that was inherently very helpful. However, somebody turns to AI to, ask questions like, what do I do with this intrusive thought? But they might not ask it in that way. They might just put the intrusive thought in there. And then, of course, that it's out of our hands at that point, right?
Yeah,
The other
that
thing I
sums it
will
up
say is that,
perfectly. It's out of our
yeah,
hands. Like that is terrifying. Right.
yeah, yeah, an AI will never, ever be able to replace or replicate human connection, which, in
Right.
my opinion, is like 80 to 90% of therapy. It's 80 to 90% of our healing, right? It's
Right.
so much more than skills, but being able to feel seen and heard and have a model for a secure relationship and what a secure relationship should be is something, that's a quality that's privy to
Yeah.
humans, right? That it's not necessarily something that we can experience with a machine that's kind of learning as it goes, if that makes sense,
Yeah. And
right?
like even when you go to it for information about hormones or whatever, like
Mhm.
neutral information, you always have to double check, right? Because it's sifting information through, I mean, I don't really know, but millions of data points, I'm sure. And like maybe by now it's gotten better with certain things like that are probably constantly Googled or chat GPT or whatever, because,
But the more
women
you
be
use
having
it, the smarter it
hormones.
gets. Yeah.
Yeah.
The more you use it, the smarter it gets, which is really cool. And ultimately it just like it sources all of the data on the World Wide Web and it predicts what might come next, which is really cool. So it operates as a predictive mechanism. And
Right.
in doing so, it also learns, right? It learns the ways in which we may communicate and then enters that into certain predictions. So if you know a little bit about coding, it's like just like a very highly sophisticated coding language that is a crazy powerful tool, you know?
I was,
It's almost like too powerful unless you know how to
yes.
use it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like how you both made sure to say that it defaults to being like on your side. And yeah, because I was reading about, I think it was an article in The Atlantic about AI and where it could go. Like I get that it's here and you have to learn to work with it. We all have to learn to work with it to ensure it remains not harmful. I'm sure there's a better word than not harmful, but there I go. Anyway, I was reading about one of the roads it could go down, and then us becoming more isolated and like thinking of younger kids growing up and using an AI or a chat GPT or a bot like to converse with, like as your friend, you get home from school and you start chatting with this character or whatever. Bot? Do we call it a bot? Anyway, point is, this bot is going to feed you back what you want to hear. And it's going to be that like constant reaffirming friend and you're right. And, da, da, da. And like, we're not going to learn those skills of like those social skills to say,
Yep.
maybe I'm self-referencing too much because I can read Tasia's reactions and something's a little off, or I've offended Alyssa in some way because I can read her body language or by what she's saying back to me. And if you're not learning those skills, how in the world are we going to socially interact in the future? And I don't, hopefully it won't get there because I think we will keep that on top of mind as this thing is getting better and getting better. And I don't know, there's this generation, I don't know which one it is, but it was saying about one of the generations coming up are more offline than online than the previous generation. I don't know if you've heard of this at all, but
Yeah.
anyway, so hopefully we're teaching kids these days the importance of this social interaction as well as adapting to the technology as it grows, because you don't want to be left behind, you know?
Totally.
Okay. Given that it is the time of year that it is, and we know people have a hard time, and even if it wasn't, this is still good advice, but given that, if someone can't access psychotherapy for whatever reason, or they're just a bit nervous, is there one thing that you would want them to know about how to, I don't know, quote unquote, survive the holidays, or just like how to be a bit more gentle to themselves as they work their way to the other side of Christmas? And
Yeah.
yeah.
It reminds me of one of my favorite quotes from Hamlet, actually, and I'm just gonna like out geek myself here, but Hamlet says, if there's nothing good or bad in this world, but thinking makes it so. And so what that means is that, like, Christmas inherently, even though there's expectations, all these things, or the holiday season coming up, when we can kind of perceive it for what it is and really recognize the ways in which our thoughts are coming into play about it. And our thoughts are usually the ones that are fighting whatever's coming up here. So in, shifting from thoughts a little bit more to emotions, if you're feeling it, it's valid, it's real. Our emotions are data. And if you're feeling sad, or if you're feeling isolated, if you're feeling, some kind of way about everything, it is important to pay attention to that, but also recognize that, our emotions are not permanent. And they'll sometimes be made worse by the ways in which we think, the ways in which we meet our emotions. And so if we can shift to a place of validating our experience and reassuring ourselves that we are human, who we're meant to feel the entire spectrum of emotions. And if we can just be a little bit gentler, a bit kinder to ourselves, that will really go a long way. And if you have some friends, reach out to your people. Right.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I
Alyssa,
mean,
anything
no,
different or
everything that
similar?
Tasia said, but I think to her point, we can't control the world around us, though I wish we could, right? We can't control the world around us, and that means we can't control a lot of the variables that can occur around the holidays that can increase a lot of distress or uncertainty or avoidance or you name it, discomfort. And so part of, I think, what can be accessible to every person is, as she had sort of mentioned, accepting the reality of our circumstances. That means holding space for our emotions, holding space for, what it is that we're faced with. Of course, a huge part of my practice is somatic based. That means body based. That means I focus on nervous system regulation and the benefits that it can bring to us. So just as our mind is incredibly powerful, as Tasha mentioned, so is our body. And so there's a lot that is within access to us to help us cope through what is out of our control. Right. And so, if people are feeling incredibly distressed or anxious or notice discomfort or avoidance as they lead into a period that could be very difficult for whatever reason, right? Coming back to the body and focusing on regulation, even if it's, Googling deep breathing exercise, right? There's so many things that are accessible to us on YouTube, on social media, again, as long as we're consuming, maybe appropriate material from these places, right? But there's so much that is readily available at our fingertips that can help us be resilient through what is out of our control. And so maybe that's maybe another thing that I would offer as maybe more practical advice.
It's like maybe you can sneak away from that big family gathering and go into the bathroom and just close your eyes and picture yourself as that cork in the ocean. Honestly, like
Yeah.
sometimes I'm just like, you were just a cork floating in the ocean. There's nothing to fight. Because then it takes away this fight or flight
Right.
because there's nothing to, you're just bobbing
Yeah.
along. You have no control. And yeah, that's scary, but it's also a bit of a gift because you don't have to go out
Very
there and
much.
control the
Yeah.
situation because
I
you
have
can't,
a
you know?
Bingo.
fantastic therapist
Yeah.
who, when I first started working with her, just kind of blew my mind. I've been working with her for many years now. And I was talking about, basically my own resistance to my own suffering. Okay. It's unfair. Things shouldn't, right?
As we
As
all
we do
do.
as human beings, right? Who doesn't want to resist their own suffering? But I was really resisting it, right? Like, why things shouldn't be this way. Why is it this way? I don't want this, etc. And she had said something to the effect of, what if life is about suffering in part? And that just really kind of like hit me at the time. And I think I struggled to really make sense of it at the time, where I'd said, well, what the heck do you mean by that? Like, what do you mean we're meant to suffer? Like, that's BS. But I think that statement is not meant to create distress for somebody, or, like create this anxiety, like, oh gosh, I like, what's ahead, but it's more so to be able to like help us firmly root ourselves in what is actually within our control, but also remind ourselves of our own resiliency, because Lord knows we've suffered, right? Lord knows we've struggled, and yet here we are, right? And we might yet again,
Mm.
and yet here we are,
Yeah.
right? So I think there's strength in acknowledging, the reality, and part of reality is that it kind of sucks sometimes, right? And so we find ways to cope,
Yeah.
right?
I, I always like
Yeah.
to say, like the Buddhists, they say it best, the first of the Four Noble Truths in Buddhism, which is like their basically discourse on just the reality of the universe and all that, is that life involves suffering, right? And again, just to Alyssa's point, like we don't have any control over that. Sometimes life really sucks, right? Now, as humans, in our capacity to feel suffering, we equally have the capacity to feel light, joy, contentment, and so on and so forth. One does not exist without the other, right? And we are just creatures of that duality, which is really reassuring. We might not feel it in every single moment, even though it is available in every single moment. The heaviness will always be balanced out by the not so heavy, by the light, right? And sometimes it's just not available to us in that moment. It might not be our time to see it or to feel it. And that's also okay, because it's going to come right back.
I love Tasia and I had a chat yesterday and we were just talking about other things and I told her, I'm like, I'm reading this book that my like best friend sent me in the mail because she loved it. And it's called The Nightingale. And I'm like, it's a really nice book, but I'm like 80 pages from the end and I know something really bad's about to happen. Like I can sense what's going to happen. So I literally put the book down and I've read two since. And I was like, Tasha, that's how much I'll go to not have to deal with something really dark. And you said, you were so sweet. You were like, yes, but until you're willing to feel all the dark, you can't fully tap into all the depths of the joy. And it's been said to me before, because I really love to reframe and not feel dark feelings. So I have a really great therapist who's like, Nadine, like to feel the full range of feelings, you've got to feel the full range of all the feelings. You can't pick and choose and pretend sadness is joy. And I had thought about it. Did I pick up the book last night? I did not. I'm like digging into my new Louise Penny because she's my comfort food for my brain. But I am gonna pick up that book because I was like tucking into bed, pulling out my book, and I'm like, God, she's right. She sees me. I need to finish that book because I know it's gonna be a beautiful ending because it's been beautiful writing for the first three quarters. I just have to read
Nadine,
this
also,
scene.
it's November. You don't need to read a sad book in November. Read it in May
Okay.
when things are
May,
happy
yeah.
again. Like it's fine.
Yeah.
This is not the
And
time to pick out the dark
choose
book. Like read
choose
read the
your own
smut,
your
read
own
the fun
moments for
things.
behavioral
Like,
experiment.
yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
fair. Maybe I'll read the fourth wig instead. My
There you go.
Oh, you too. Thanks so much for coming on. Thanks for sharing your
Aw.
insights and your wisdom and your humanness because yeah, especially this time of year, it's nice that people can hear some grounding things or, not feel so alone and be like, "Oh, I'm having a hard time because it makes sense that I'm having a hard time." Because sometimes, to Alyssa's point just then, we almost resist our own suffering and that we don't even want to admit it, or we feel shamed that we feel this way because it's a joyful time of year. We should be feeling this. So it's been really nice. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for having
This has
us,
been
Nadine. You're
great,
the best.
honestly.
You're the best.
Thank you for having
I know
us.
Come back again,
Okay.
please.
We will.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Bye.